The music sphere had not played a single note in 40 years. The Drenari mother held it the way someone holds a dying bird, carefully, like too much pressure might finish the job. She was tall, gray-skinned, with forearms folded tight against her chest, and her vertical pupils were wet with something that needed no translation. Grief looked the same in every species. She placed the sphere on the counter of the smallest repair stall in Haven, 09's Forgotten Market District, and said, "Every Drenari technician on this station has told me it is beyond saving." Lena Bowen wiped grease off her fingers with a rag that was more grease than rag. She was 19, small-framed, with dark hair pulled into a messy knot and oil stains on her cheeks that she had stopped noticing months ago. Her shop was barely wider than a closet. Shelves lined every wall, crammed with alien gadgets in various stages of broken and almost fixed. "Can I hold it?" Lena asked. The mother hesitated, then nodded. Lena picked up the sphere. It was heavier than it looked, warm in a way metal should not be. She turned it slowly in the light, feeling the weight shift inside. Something was loose. No, not loose. Displaced. The internal crystal lattice, the part that generated species-specific frequencies tuned to Drenari hearing, had shifted out of alignment. Not by much, by a fraction so small that diagnostic scanners would miss it entirely. But Lena's fingers did not miss it. She did not use a scanner. She did not plug it into anything. She sat on her stool, held the sphere close to her ear, and hummed. Low at first, then shifting pitch, searching for something only she could feel. Her eyes went half-closed. Her breathing slowed. 47 minutes later, the sphere sang. The sound was not meant for human ears, but Lena could feel it in her bones. A lullaby. Ancient, soft, full of a tenderness that crossed every barrier between species. The Drenari mother pressed all four hands against her face and wept without sound. My grandmother recorded that lullaby before she died. The mother whispered. My daughter has never heard it. Lena smiled and set the sphere down gently. 10 credits. The mother stared at her. You cannot be serious. That's what I charge. The mother paid, took the sphere like it was made of light, and left. Lena watched her go, then turned back to the pile of work on her counter. A Paliki child's hover cart with a burned-out motivator. A Siluri data pendant with a cracked housing. A human kid's stuffed animal with a torn voice box. Broken things. Small things. Things that matter to someone. You know, said a voice from a noodle stand next door, you could have charged her 500 credits, and she would have kissed your feet. Darrow leaned against the partition between their stalls, stirring a pot of broth with 2 of his 6 fingers. He was Paliki, which meant he was short, covered in reddish-brown fur, and possessed an opinion about everything. He was also the closest thing Lena had to a best friend on this station, which said more about her social life than she liked to admit. I fix toys, Darrow. I do not rob people. It is not robbery if the service is worth it. That sphere is a cultural artifact. You just did something no Drenari engineer could do, and you charge her the same as a battery swap. Lena shrugged. I charge what is fair. You charge what is stupid, Darrow muttered, but he was smiling. He always smiled when he scolded her. It was their routine. Lena had learned everything she knew from her grandfather, a retired fleet engineer named Harold Bowen who had served in the Human Expansion Wars and then settled on Haven 09 to spend his remaining years doing something quieter than building warship engines. He had taught Lena to fix things before she could read, not with manuals or diagnostics, but with her hands and her instincts. Feel what it wants to be, he used to say. Everything that is broken remembers what it was. He had died 3 years ago. Lena kept his tools. She kept his stall. She kept fixing things. That was enough. The market closed late on Haven 09. Lena pulled the security grate down over her counter, locked it with a key that was older than she was, and climbed the narrow stairs to her quarters above the shop. 1 room, 1 bed, 1 window that looked out onto the station's inner hall, where maintenance lights blinked in patterns she had memorized years ago. She set her bag down and noticed something on her counter that had not been there before. A box. Small, maybe the size of her fist, made of a metal she did not recognize. It was dark, almost black, but with faint lines running through it that caught the light like veins. There was no note, no name, no shipping label. Lena picked it up. It was warm, not like the music sphere. This warmth went deeper, like it was coming from inside the metal itself, like something in there was alive and breathing. She opened the box. Inside was a device. She had no word for it. It was not a gadget, not a tool, not a toy. It was something else entirely. Elegant, ancient, covered in markings that seemed to shift when she was not looking directly at them. She held in her palm that IT hummed. Not a mechanical hum, not an electrical hum. Something deeper, older, a vibration she felt in her chest like a second heartbeat. Lena sat down on her bed, cradling the device, and forgot about sleep entirely. 41 hours without sleep, and Lena's hands had not stopped moving. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her shop, surrounded by tools she had not used and sketches she did not remember drawing. The device from the black box lay open in her lap, its insides exposed like the guts of a clock, made by someone who thought in dimensions humans had no names for. Pieces floated where pieces should not float. Connections existed between parts that did not physically touch. The whole thing broke every rule of engineering Lena had ever learned from her grandfather. And yet her fingers moved across it with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She could not explain it. She did not try. Lena. Darrow stood in the doorway, holding a bowl of broth. His fur was flat against his skull, which meant he was worried. Paliki fur only flattened when they were genuinely scared. You have not eaten in 2 days. I ate something. You ate half a protein bar yesterday morning and then used the wrapper to write notes on. That does not count. Lena blinked and looked up. The light in her shop was different. She had lost track of time again. What day is it? It is the day your friend Darrow loses his patience, he said, setting the broth down beside her. Lena, what is that thing? She looked at the device. I do not know. Then why are you killing yourself over it? Because it is broken, she said quietly. And I think I can fix it. 2,000 light years away, in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Imperial Council, the mood was considerably worse. The hall was built to impress. Vaulted ceilings made of siluri crystal. Seats arranged in rising tiers, each section designed for a different species. Drenari delegates sat in humidity-controlled pods. Paliki representatives clustered in low-gravity nests. Rethon elders floated in suspension chairs that kept their ancient bodies from aching. Human ambassadors sat in standard seats because humans were adaptable enough to sit anywhere and stubborn enough to not complain about it. The topic was the anomalies. 0.7 deep space disturbances had been detected in the last galactic cycle, each one at the far edge of known territory. They appeared without warning, massive tears in normal space that radiated energy signatures no database could identify. Every probe sent to investigate had gone silent. Every ship that got too close had vanished. No reiki, no distress signals, just silence. We propose a joint military task force, said the Drenari delegate, her 4 arms folded in the formal posture of serious intent. Military force against what? The Paliki trade minister shot back. We do not even know what these things are. You want to shoot at a hole in space. We want to be prepared. Prepared for bankruptcy, perhaps. Do you know what a joint task force costs? The argument continued. It had been continuing for weeks. The council was frightened, and frightened people argued. In the observer gallery above the hall, a man in a plain gray uniform watched without expression. Admiral Soren Hack was 62 years old, lean and weathered, with the kind of face that had stopped trying to be handsome decades ago and settled for looking reliable instead. He had commanded fleets, negotiated treaties, buried friends, and survived 3 wars. Nothing surprised him anymore. His communicator vibrated. A single message, text only, from a classified channel. Seed key 5 activated. Haven 09. Human female. No prior contact. Hack read it twice. Then he stood, straightened his uniform, and left the gallery without a word. Back on Haven 09, Lena touched the last connection inside the device. The IT unfolded. Not mechanically. Not like a box opening or a flower blooming. It unfolded in a way that made the air in the room taste different and the light bend slightly sideways. The device rose from her hands and hovered at chest height, spinning slowly, and then it projected something into the air above it. A blueprint, but not a flat image. A living, three-dimensional schematic that filled her tiny shop from floor to ceiling. It showed a machine, something so complex and so vast that Lena's brain tried to reject it the way a cup tries to reject an ocean. She saw connections between components that operated on principles she had no vocabulary for. She saw energy flowing through channels that existed in spaces between spaces. She saw a design so beautiful it made her eyes water, and so overwhelming it made her nose bleed. Blood dripped on her shirt. She did not notice. For 3 seconds, she understood all of it. Every piece, every connection, every purpose. The machine was not just a machine. It was a statement, written in metal and energy and mathematics, by people who had been terrified of something and had poured their terror into building the only thing that could answer it. Then her vision went white, and she hit the floor. She woke up on the floor of her shop with Darrow pressing a cold cloth to her forehead and shouting her name. The device had gone quiet again, sitting on the counter like it had never moved. Her nose had stopped bleeding, but her shirt was ruined. "I'm calling a medic," Darrow said firmly. "No, I am fine. You were unconscious for 6 minutes. That is not fine." Before Lena could argue, a shadow filled her doorway. Then another. The first figure was human, tall, gray uniformed, with the kind of calm that only comes from having survived things that should have killed you. Admiral Soren Hack looked at Lena the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. The second figure was not human. A Rethon, ancient and frail, floating in a suspension chair. Its skin was deep blue, almost translucent, and its enormous dark eyes were locked on the device sitting on Lena's counter. The Rethon's name was Olive, and the expression on its face was one Lena had never seen on any Rethon before. The IT was fear. Nobody had ever told Lena Bowen that she was important, and she had never wanted to hear it. But Admiral Hack and the Rethon scientist named Olive were standing in her shop, looking at her like she was the answer to a question the entire galaxy had been asking for a very long time, and the silence between them was heavy enough to crush furniture. Darrow stood between Lena and the strangers with his fur bristling straight up, which was the Paliki equivalent of baring teeth. "Who are you, and why are you in her shop?" Hack looked at the small, furry merchant with the same expression he probably used when looking at a locked door. "Mild inconvenience, nothing more." "Admiral Soren Hack, Imperial Strategic Command. I need to speak with Miss Bowen." "About what?" "That," Hack said, pointing at the device on the counter. Olive had not spoken yet. The ancient Rethon floated forward in the suspension chair, extending one thin, translucent arm toward the device but not touching it. "It is active," Olive whispered. "By the deep currents, it is truly active. Will someone please tell me what is happening?" Lena said. Hack pulled a stool from the corner, sat down without being invited, and spoke plainly. Lena would later appreciate that about him. He did not dress things up. He did not soften them. He spoke to her the way her grandfather used to speak when something serious needed saying. The device was called a seed key. It was one of 7 scattered across the galaxy, left behind by a civilization so old that every current species was still single-celled when they vanished. They were called the Architects. No one knew what they looked like. No one knew where they went. But they left behind the seed keys, and each key contained a fragment of a design for a machine called the Loom. "What does the Loom do?" Lena asked. "We do not know exactly," Olive answered, speaking slowly in the careful way Rethon always did when choosing words in human language. "Every species that has studied the architect remnants believes it is either a weapon or a shield, possibly both. What we do know is that it was built for a purpose, and that purpose is connected to the anomalies currently appearing at the edges of known space." Lena remembered the news feeds she sometimes watched while eating dinner alone. Strange disturbances, missing ships, council arguments. She had not paid much attention. They felt far away from her little shop and her little life. "Something is coming," Hack said. "Something the architects were afraid of, and they built the Loom to stop it." "Then build it," Lena said. The silence that followed told her everything. Olive explained. The seed keys had been found before, many times over thousands of years. The finest scientific minds from every species had held them, studied them, scanned them with every instrument ever invented. The keys remained dead, cold metal in every hand that touched them. Until Lena. "I do not understand," she said. "I'm not a scientist. I fix toys." Olive's enormous dark eyes softened. "Miss Bowen, humans are a curiosity among galactic species. You're not the strongest. You do not live the longest. Your technology, while impressive, is not the most advanced. But your species possesses something no other species has in the same measure. We call it empathic pattern recognition." Lena shook her head. "I do not know what that means." "It means," Olive said gently, "that when you hold a broken music sphere, you do not simply analyze its components. You feel what it was meant to be. You sense the intent behind the design. You connect with the purpose of the object on a level that transcends logic. Most humans have this trait in small amounts. It is why your species creates art, why you cry at music written by strangers, why you comfort dying animals that are not even your own kind." Olive paused. "You, Miss Bowen, have this trait in a concentration I have never measured before in any living being." The words hit Lena like cold water. She looked at the seed key on her counter. She thought about the 3 seconds before she passed out, when the entire loom had unfolded in her mind and she had understood all of it. Not with her brain, with something deeper. "I fix toys," she said again, but quieter this time. Hack leaned forward. "Miss Bowen, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you this will be easy or safe. I'm not going to order you to do anything, because you are a civilian and I have no authority over you. But I'm going to tell you what is at stake." He paused. "Every station like this one, every colony, every ship full of families moving between worlds, every Drenari mother carrying a music sphere, every child who has ever brought a broken toy to your counter. If the anomalies reach populated space, and we have no way to stop them, all of it ends." Lena's throat was tight. She wanted to say no. She wanted to close her shop and climb the stairs to her room and pretend this was not happening. But she thought about the lullaby inside the music sphere. She thought about her grandfather's hands, steady and sure, teaching her to feel what things wanted to be. She thought about all the broken things she had fixed and all the broken things she could not. "I will try," she said. Hack nodded once. "On one condition." Lena pointed at Darrow. "He comes with me." Darrow's fur went flat again. "What? Where are we going?" "Classified," Hack said. "That is not reassuring. It is not meant to be." They left Haven 09 that night aboard a fast military corvette. Lena sat by the viewport, watching the station shrink behind them until it was just another light among thousands. Darrow sat beside her, gripping the armrest with all 6 fingers and muttering prayers in Paliki trade cant. She wondered if she would ever see her little shop again. Deep Well was not a place that wanted to be found. Hidden inside an asteroid field that would rip any unguided ship to shrapnel, the research station sat in perfect darkness like a spider waiting in a web. No running lights. No via consignas. Just a cold, angular structure bolted into the belly of a dead rock, full of secrets and the people paid to keep them. Lena hated it immediately. The corridors were narrow, the lighting was flat and sterile, and everything smelled like recycled air and cleaning chemicals. There were no windows, no market noise, no smell of Darrow's broth drifting through the walls. It was the opposite of everything she knew, and the silence made her teeth ache. Commander Priya Nair met them at the docking bay. She was a compact woman with sharp cheekbones and the posture of someone who slept standing up. She looked at Lena the way a surgeon looks at a tool she did not order. "This is the asset," Nair asked Hack. "This is Lena Bowen," Hack corrected. "She is a civilian volunteer. Treat her accordingly." Nair said nothing further, which was worse than an argument. The team was small. Olive led the research side, floating through the station in the suspension chair that seemed to be an extension of the Rethon's body. A young human technician named Fenwick was assigned as Lena's assistant. He was 23, pale, jittery, and spoke in a way that suggested every sentence was a question he hoped someone else would answer. He carried a tablet everywhere and took notes on everything, including how many sugars Lena put in her coffee. 2 sugars, for the record. The final member was the one who unsettled Lena the most. A Siluri observer named Irith. The Siluri were crystalline beings, tall and translucent, who communicated through vibrations in their lattice structures. Irith stood in the corner of every room like a glass statue and said almost nothing. But those faceted eyes watched everything, and Lena could never shake the feeling that Irith was reading something inside her that she could not see herself. 3 seed keys had already been recovered and were stored in containment chambers deep inside the station. Olive led Lena to the first one. "Take your time," Olive said. Lena did not need time. She touched the first key, and it opened like a book falling to a favorite page. Light poured from it, warm and golden, and another piece of the loom's blueprint wrote itself into her mind. She gasped. Her knees buckled. Fenwick caught her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice climbing an octave. "Yes." Her nose was bleeding. She wiped it with the back of her hand. Next one. The second key activated the same way. Instant, effortless, like it had been waiting for her specifically. More of the design filled her head, connecting to the pieces from the first 2 keys, building a picture so vast it made her vision swim. The third key resisted. Not much, just a moment of hesitation, like a door that needed a harder push. Lena pressed her palms against it and closed her eyes. She felt for the intent behind the design, the way her grandfather taught her. "What do you want to be?" She pushed gently, not with force, but with understanding. The key opened. The blueprint grew. Lena sat on the floor afterward, breathing hard, blood on her lip and her shirt. Her notebook, the battered one she had brought from her shop, was open on her knees, and she was sketching, not with precision instruments. With a pencil, fast and messy, filling pages with designs that poured out of her like water from a cracked pipe. Olive examined the sketches and went very still. "These match our theoretical models," the Rethon said quietly. "Models that took my people 70 years to develop. But yours are more complete. Miss Bowen, you have drawn components we did not know existed." Lena did not answer. She was still drawing. That night, Darrow found her in the station's small common room, staring at nothing. He sat beside her and placed a cup of something warm in her hands. He had found the station's food synthesizer and somehow bullied it into producing a reasonable imitation of his broth. "Talk to me," he said. "When I touch the keys," Lena said slowly, "I do not just see the machine. I feel the people who made it. The architects. They were afraid, Darrow. The same kind of afraid that I felt when grandfather got sick and I knew he was not going to get better. They built the loom because they were desperate. They poured everything they had into it, every bit of genius and hope and terror, and then they designed it so that it could only be finished by someone who could feel all of that." She looked at him. They were not betting on intelligence. They were betting on empathy. They needed someone who could not look at a broken thing without wanting to fix it. Darrow's fur flattened. "They were betting on you. They were betting on humans," Lena said. "On what we are. They built this millions of years before we existed, and they trusted that something like us would come along. Something irrational enough to cry over a stranger's lullaby and stubborn enough to sit up all night fixing a toy that is not even ours." The station shuddered. A distant alarm pulsed once, then stopped. Fenwick appeared in the doorway, pale as paper. An anomaly just formed. Close. Much closer than any of the others. Lena looked at Darrow. He looked back. 3 seed keys still missing. The loom half finished. And whatever the architects had feared was no longer waiting at the edges. It was coming. 3 ships went out to retrieve the remaining seed keys. Only 2 came back. Lena was in the fabrication bay when the news arrived. She had been working for 14 hours straight. Assembling pieces of the loom from the blueprints burned into her mind. Her hands were cracked and raw. Her eyes were bloodshot. Fenwick had given up asking her to rest and had instead taken to leaving food near her workstation the way someone leaves offerings at a temple, quietly and without expectation. Commander Nair delivered the report herself. The corvette sent to the Rethon border system had gone silent 12 hours ago. 37 crew. The 5th seed key had been aboard, gone. All of it. Lena stopped working. She put down her tools. She walked to the small viewport at the far end of the bay and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the asteroid field turned slowly in the dark, a graveyard of broken rock. 37 people. She did not know their names. She did not need to. Darrow found her there 20 minutes later. He did not say anything. He just stood beside her, his fur brushing against her elbow, and waited. Sometimes that was all he could do. Sometimes it was enough. The work did not stop. It could not stop. Olive presented the mathematics the next morning. With 6 keys instead of 7, the loom could be built to approximately 85% capacity. The gap in the design would leave the machine unstable, like a bridge with a missing support beam. It might hold. It might collapse at the worst possible moment. 85% is not good enough, Hack said. 85% is what we have, Olive replied. Lena listened from her corner of the briefing room. She had not spoken in hours. Her notebook was open on the table in front of her, filled with sketches that were becoming increasingly frantic. Pieces of the loom she could see clearly. Pieces that blurred and shifted when she tried to pin them down. In one section, the section that belonged to the missing key, that was nothing but blank space. She could feel the gap like a missing tooth. Every time she reached for the full design, her mind hit that empty space and stumbled, but she also felt something else. When she touched the keys, when she held the partially built loom, she did not just see blueprints. She felt the hands that made them. She felt the architect's intent, their fear, their desperate hope. And woven through all of it, like a thread running through fabric, she felt an invitation. Not a demand. A question. Will you finish what we started? Lena closed her notebook. I can fill the gap. Every head in the room turned. The missing piece is a pattern, she said. A specific resonance frequency that the 7th key was supposed to provide during activation. I cannot recreate the key, but I can hold the pattern myself. In my mind, during the activation sequence, I could channel it directly into the loom. Olive's translucent skin went pale. Miss Bowen, the energy required to sustain that pattern would pass through your nervous system. The human brain is not designed to carry that load. I know. It could kill you. I know that too. Hack looked at her for a long moment. She had seen that look on her grandfather's face once, the day he told her that sometimes fixing something costs more than the thing is worth, and you have to decide if you are willing to pay. Your choice, Hack said. It was always my choice. The remaining 2 keys arrived over the next 3 days. Lena activated them both without hesitation, and the final pieces of the loom's design clicked into place in her mind. All of it except the gap. The beautiful, terrible gap that she was going to fill with herself. She worked around the clock. The loom took shape in the fabrication bay, growing from a skeleton of strange metal into something that was part machine, part sculpture, part living thing. It hummed at frequencies that made everyone who entered the bay feel something they could not name. Fenwick said it felt like homesickness. Nair said it felt like standing at attention. Darrow said it felt like the moment before you open a door and you do not know what is on the other side. Irith, the Siluri observer, stood before the half-finished loom for an entire hour without moving. Then, for the first time since arriving, Irith spoke. The crystalline voice was thin and high, like wind through glass. It is a song, Irith said. The architects built a song. On the final night, before the activation, Lena sat in her quarters. Darrow was there, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, his 6 fingers wrapped around a cup of cold broth he had forgotten to drink. You do not have to do this, he said. You have said that 4 times now. I will say it a 5th time if it helps. Lena smiled. It was the first smile she had managed in days, and it hurt more than she expected. Darrow, if I do not do this, and that thing comes through, everyone dies. You, Fenwick, Nair, everyone on Haven, 09. Every child, whoever brought me a broken toy. I cannot live in a galaxy where I could have helped and did not. Darrow wiped his eyes with the back of his paw. You humans are insufferable. I know. The station alarm screamed to life at 0347 hours. Not a drill. Not a proximity warning. The real thing. The anomaly that had been lurking at the edge of the system had ripped open, and this time it was not closing. Something was pushing through. Lena ran to the fabrication bay, barefoot, still pulling on her jacket. The loom stood waiting in the center of the room, 6 seed keys orbiting it like planets around a sun, humming with a sound that shook the walls. She placed her hands on the loom, and she began. It did not come with teeth or claws or warships. It came with silence. The anomaly split open like a wound in the fabric of everything. And what poured through was not a creature or a fleet. It was an absence, a vast, rolling nothingness that swallowed light and sound and hope in equal measure. Where it touched a ship, the ship stopped. Engines died. Lights went dark. Crew members collapsed where they stood, eyes open, seeing nothing, feeling nothing, trapped in a despair so total it erased the will to breathe. Commander Nair ordered every weapon on Deepwell to fire. Missiles vanished into the darkness without detonation. Energy beams bent sideways and dissolved. The defensive drones circling the station dropped out of the sky like dead birds. Nothing is working, Nair said, and for the first time her voice cracked. Inside the fabrication bay, Lena did not hear any of it. Her hands were on the loom, and the loom was alive. 6 seed keys spun around it in perfect orbit, pouring light and data into the structure. The machine assembled itself under her touch, pieces clicking into place with a precision that made the air hum. Metal flowed like water. Energy arced between components in colors that human eyes were not built to see, but Lena saw anyway, because the loom was showing her, teaching her, opening doors in her mind that had been locked since birth. And then the pattern reached the gap, the place where the 7th key should have been. The missing piece, the blank space in the song. The loom stuttered. The humming faltered. The spinning keys wobbled. Lena pushed. She pushed her mind into the gap the way she pushed her fingers into the guts of a broken music sphere. She felt for the shape of what was missing, the intent behind it, the purpose it was meant to serve. And she found it, not in logic or mathematics, but in the place where she had always found answers. In the part of her that could not look at a broken thing without wanting to make it whole. The pain was immediate. It felt like her skull was splitting along seams she did not know she had. Her vision went white, then red, then into colors she had no names for. Blood ran from her nose and ears. Her hands shook on the surface of the loom, and she felt herself stretching, thinning, spreading across the gap like a bridge made of thought and stubborn refusal to quit. She felt the architects then, not as ghosts, as echoes, millions of years old, faint as starlight, but real. They were with her. They had always been with her. They had built this moment into the design, not a specific person, but a type of person. Someone who fixes broken things because the silence of something that should be singing is unbearable. Darrow was at the edge of the bay. Fenwick was holding him back. Darrow was screaming her name, but she could not hear him. She could feel him, though. She could feel his fear and his love, and his furious refusal to let her go. She could feel Fenwick's trembling hands and the way his heart was beating so hard it shook his whole chest. She could feel Nair on the command deck, standing straight, even as the station crumbled around her. She could feel Oliv's ancient wonder, vast and deep as an ocean. She could feel Irith vibrating at a frequency that was either a prayer or a scream. She felt every living being on the station. And beyond the station, beyond the asteroid field, beyond the system, she felt the galaxy, every frightened soul in it, every child clutching a toy in the dark, every mother singing a lullaby against the silence. She poured all of it into the gap. The loom activated. IT did not fire a weapon. It did not raise a shield. It sang a single, impossible note that traveled through space at a speed that broke every law of physics ever written. It was a frequency, a countertone to the silence that was eating the galaxy. Not a command, not a threat, a declaration that we are here. We exist. We choose to keep existing. The darkness recoiled, not because it was damaged, but because it had encountered the one thing it could not erase. Life that knew it was alive and refused to stop being so. Stubborn, irrational, weeping, laughing, toy-fixing, lullaby-singing life. The anomaly folded inward. Slowly at first, then faster, collapsing like a wave pulling back from shore it could not hold. The silence retreated. The ships drifted back online. The lights returned. Lena let go of the loom and fell. She did not wake up for 11 days. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Darrow, asleep in a chair beside her bed, his fur matted and dirty, his 6 fingers still curled around her hand. He had not let go. Fenwick had left a small vase of synthetic flowers on the table. A card was tucked between the stems. It read, "Please do not do that again. Commander Nair visited once." She stood at the foot of the bed, looked at Lena, and said, "Well done, Miss Bowen." Then she left. For Nair, that was practically a love letter. Olive told her that the loom was dormant but intact. It would remain at Deep Well, ready if the darkness ever returned. It would need a keeper, someone who could hear it and keep it tuned. But not today, Olive said. No, Lena agreed. Not today. She went home. Back on Haven 09, she reopened her shop. The sign still read the same as it always had. Darrow fired up his noodle stand. The market filled with noise and life and the smell of alien spices. On her first morning back, a Drenari child walked in, clutching a broken music sphere. Lena smiled, took it gently from the child's gray hands, and got to work.